Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Aly Veneno with Guitar World Magazine and AlyIsMagic.com. I'm sitting here with fellow Washingtonian Tosin Abasi of Animals as Leaders, who is undoubtedly one of the world's most legendary 8-string guitarists. How does it feel to hear that you're recognized as a legendary 8-string guitarist?
It's cool. It's not a huge community, I think, of 8-string players. But I think it's awesome that it's been validated as an instrument. A lot of major manufacturers are producing 8-string guitars, and that definitely wasn't the case before. And I think it's awesome to be considered like an innovator in that space. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, considering that right now you're on tour with Generation X, and Steve Vai said himself that when creating this show, he was going to pick his favorite guitarists, and they are artists who are well in touch with their craft and play well with their instruments. And the fact that he picked you alongside with Yngwie Malmsteen, Zakk Wylde, and Nuno Bettencourt, that has to be an overwhelming feeling.
Yeah. It's like beyond an honor. Steve is a huge influence on me as a player, and beyond his music, I mean, he innovated in the guitar space as well. Like, there's tons of products that he was at the center of. You know, the idea that you could have more than 6 strings on an electric guitar, you know, you could credit Steve with bringing that to the mainstream. And so to be, you know, selected amongst everyone else on this tour, it was just, I remember when he first called me, I definitely, like, you know, had to pause and really be like, wait, is this real, you know? Because these dudes are, you know, guys that I learned to play guitar watching.
Right.
So, yeah, it's like a dream come true.
That's absolutely amazing. And what made you want to play 8-string versus a 7 or a 6?
Well, I started on 6, and I thought that's, you know, how many strings came on a guitar. It wasn't like I was, you know, necessarily feeling limited or anything, but I remember the nu metal wave occurred, and there was a lot of bands that I was into that were playing 7 strings. And I think, you know, Steve creating the universe with Ibanez, and guys like John Bertucci playing it, and Steve playing it with Whitesnake and on his own compositions, and then it filtering into bands like Korn and stuff like that. So it entered my sphere through that, and then I, you know, started getting into more advanced guitar playing, and I discovered Dream Theater and Steve Vai, and so the 7-string became the next step, and that was kind of my thing for a while. I found that by adding that string, for some reason, I had like a creative boost, and I was like writing riffs a bit more effortlessly. It's kind of like, I didn't really try to understand it, but I just liked that by adding that string, I felt like the guitar opened up a bit more. And then I stayed on 7 for a while, and then there's a band called Meshuggah who put out an album called Nothing, and it had 8-string guitar on it. And I remember hearing it and I didn't know there was 8-string guitar on it, and I heard it and I couldn't really identify what I was hearing all the way. It was different than a detuned guitar. It was like, what's going on? So that was intriguing. And then there's a guitar player named Charlie Hunter who, he does 8-string guitar, but it's a little different. He emulates bass and guitar at the same time. He has 2 outputs. One goes to a bass amp, and then the treble strings go to a guitar amp. And he's doing amazing, like, you know, blues sort of R&B style guitar playing with the full range of the 8-string guitar. So those two sort of perspectives on extended range made it seem like, man, I really could get into this. So that's where the 8-string thing started happening.
Very cool. So you kind of mentioned something about opening up your playing abilities and hitting different ranges. So if we take it back to, you know, the beginning of your career, when your band Reflux disbanded, you were actually asked by Prosthetic Records to create a solo album. And at that point, you had said that you felt it was egotistical and that, you know, it just, there was no need for it. And ultimately you did end up doing this solo album, but after you took, I guess, a hiatus, went and got some music education. Now, what would be your reasoning for feeling it was egotistical and there was no reason to do it? Was it just because you didn't feel like you were totally honed into your skills, or did you feel a sense of loyalty to your other bandmates, like, now they're gonna just take me and nobody else, or what was the thought process there?
I think I was maybe projecting some insecurity. Like, I didn't think I could carry an entire album by myself, and the idea that I guess what I thought of as a solo album seemed like, oh, I'd be the only. I guess that's where the ego part entered it for me, because I'd always been in bands.
Yeah.
I'd always been in bands. So I was just like, well, why would I make an album by myself, sort of thing. And then there was also like that sort of confidence that could I be the sole source of all the material on the album. So I think I just wasn't in a place in my playing where I felt that I could fill an entire album just with my ideas. Even though in all the bands I was in, I was like disproportionately contributing to the songwriting, if not writing all the music. It took going to the Atlanta Institute of Music and learning a bit of music theory and like diving into the guitar a bit further to where I felt like, oh yeah, I totally could make an entire album of guitar-centered music and it would be compelling, you know? So that's where that switch went.
Okay. So now that we're talking about your band, I couldn't help but feel or think that, and I might just be reaching for the stars here, but when I listen to your music, you have a very unique sound, and it's totally instrumental, which is really cool because it really takes the listener into, you know, the different tones and the sounds, and you know, there's no distraction from vocals. Not that vocals are bad, but you know, it's just a totally different style. And one thing that it made me think of is the Mahavishnu Orchestra. Are you familiar with them?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so for those that don't know what the Mahavishnu Orchestra is, it's, you know, they were very popular 70s and 80s in their fusion jazz rock. And I almost feel like your concept is somewhat similar. There's like a lot of the same sounds, especially when you're using your signature style of thumping. And I was curious if there was any inspiration from fusion rock and jazz.
Absolutely. Yeah, Mahavishnu's cool. John McLaughlin as a player, I got into stuff like after Mahavishnu, really. And he has a live album called The Heart of Things that I really was into. And it's like quintessential fusion. But I liked that he kind of shredded quite a bit. He was a really fast alternate picker, and he wasn't afraid to make really dense lines and really go there. But a lot of the harmony was like in the fusion territory, the palette of sounds as well. And then, you know, I got into guys like Alan Holdsworth, who is, you know, one of the most unique voices on guitar I think that ever existed. And that really pushed my sense of harmony into new directions. And when you play metal, like, you're not always exploring harmony, because metal is pretty localized and, you know, minor tonalities, and it has its own sort of, you know, melodic like space. And then you have jazz and fusion, and that goes into other territory. So part of what I wanted to do with Animals as Leaders was create a fusion, but not necessarily play fusion, but like in the essential sense of the word, fusing different styles into a new thing. So yeah, the fusion thing definitely is a big influence on my playing.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's a Spanish guitarist, Al Di Meola, and I, you know, always try to sit here and put pieces of a puzzle together when I don't know all the information. So it made me wonder, with you having Javier in your band as the other guitarist, and him being trained as classical Spanish and classical guitar, if possibly one of his influence was Al Di Meola, because, you know, like you, he's also played with Steve Vai, and you know, he's gotten down and he's a phenomenal guitarist. And, you know, so I couldn't help but think that there could have been a connection there.
Javier was never really much of like a lead guitar player, although I think he could be if he wanted to, but he was always more drawn to songwriting, and like he writes in this way that's like, it's reminiscent of Spanish classical, but he's evolved it into his own sort of style of that. So there's definitely, like, you know, having him in the band, I was conscious of his actual sound as a player, and all the references you were talking about. And so yeah, that stuff is in there. I'm an Al Di Meola fan as well. You know, he's one of the, like, you know, heavily influential guitar players to instrumental music and just guitar in general. So you can't help but be impacted by these dudes, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think that you're a major inspiration to a lot of up-and-comers and to a lot of people, you know, that love guitar and love the sound that you create. And I can't help but sit here and stare at that beautiful piece of wood that you have in your lap. And I mean that in a literal way. So this looks like your famous Abbasi Concepts guitar. Can you tell me a little bit about this?
Yeah. This is a prototype. It is an 8-string guitar that I designed, and it's kind of the convergence of a few, design concepts that I wanted to bring to the guitar space. I mean, playing an extended range guitar comes with some considerations. I find that just as an experience for a 6-string player to grab an 8-string, they're confronted with this sheer size of the guitar.
Yeah.
So I wanted to like shrink that footprint a bit. So part of that was narrowing the string spacing between the strings, so you have overall it compounds to a thinner neck width in general. So I found that to be a little bit more friendly to like someone approaching extended range, and then also doing a compound scale or fan fret guitar, because you would either commit to a baritone scale or a traditional scale, but both of those have compromises. You want to have a baritone scale to complement the lowest strings, but you don't necessarily want to commit your treble strings to that same scale length. So when you have a fan fret guitar, you can have your cake and eat it too. So it's 25.5 inches at its shortest points, and then it goes to 27 point something that is like longest point in the scale length. And so it's literally like having two scale lengths on the same neck. This makes it a little bit more playable when it comes to string tension and bends, because your bends are intonating similar to the way they would on a traditional guitar neck. And then you have all the temperament in the low end. The string tension feels concrete and sure of itself because the neck is long enough down there. It has a thin neck, which I like. I'm from the Ibanez camp, kind of shred guitars and stuff like that.
Yeah.
This neck is all wenge, it's a single piece. And this neck carve is cool because the thickness of the neck profile is retained all the way up until where it hits the body. So even though this cutaway is coming pretty far up into the neck, you can see you have full access, all the way up into the highest frets. The guitar is thin because I like the guitar to feel close to the torso, as flush as possible. You can see the bevels peak here. They're really quite thin. And the beveling across the face of the body allows for a pretty flush contact of the forearm against the body of the guitar. And the whole idea is to like kind of get the guitar out of the way without abandoning, aesthetic considerations. So I think it looks pretty cool. This cutaway here is useful if you play in like a classical seated position, or if you play in a traditional, electric guitar seated position. And then these pickups are made by Fishman, and they're a new technology called Fluence. And they're dual voiced, and they're really cool, extremely clear and balanced output, and they are really exciting. It's kind of a thing you have to play to know what I'm talking about, but I definitely think that's the icing on the cake. So that is the Abbasi guitar in a nutshell.
So one thing I didn't hear you mention was the type of woods
Oh,
that it was made out of, or
Yeah.
it is made out of.
This one is made out of black limba and wenge. And those, I just spec this one that way, but we're gonna have like a small custom shop, meaning you'd be able to spec a guitar within limited specs as far as wood is concerned. So this one just happens to be wenge and black limba though.
Very nice.
Yeah,
May I hold it?
you may.
All right. I just want to kind of get a feel for this
Tell
here.
me what you think.
I mean, it's super light.
Play
Now,
Smoke on the Water.
this is going to sound kind of strange. I was going to ask you what the cutaways were for, and you clearly answered those. I am not a good guitarist at all. I struggle with it, but I'll keep trying. And whenever I've posted videos, I've gotten silly comments from people. They're saying, "Oh, now we know what that cutaway on the top is for." So I always wondered, what is this cutaway for? Is it for females to make it more female friendly when you play? But then again, typically you guys are playing it much lower.
Well,
why is there usually a cutaway here?
That's a good question. I think it's because the first guitars are that acoustic shape where there's, almost like the hips of the guitar, and then it comes in at that sort of contour there, and then we just never fully abandoned that general shape. So all guitars seem to have that dip and then the horn. But if you have boobies, it's convenient as well. you
Yeah,
know?
I mean, it sits perfectly comfortable in there. So I'm going to hand you your baby back. We had asked some of our followers on the Guitar World magazine Instagram to throw out some comments and questions on things that they would like to know about you or your guitar. So I've got a few here, so I'm going to refer to my cheat sheet. And they were actually amazing
Pretty
questions. Yeah, so I'm pretty pleased with them. Well, of course, there was the one question where someone just said, how? Just how?
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 Not why.
No. Probably how do you do it?
Yeah, there's a lot going on, so there's a lot of how. But yeah, I think anything you see someone doing at a level of effortlessness probably began as something that required a lot of effort. And so you have to just remember that starting from the ground up and being conscious of how you start with, so like you lift, right?
Right.
Right, so you don't begin by lifting all the weight in the world, and you have to be mindful of form and technique because that gets infused into your movement patterns, and it can screw you over in the future if you don't pay attention at the onset.
Right.
So guitar is the same way. So the how is actually, it's pretty boring, but you want to do things slow and consciously, and then the speed and effortlessness will come eventually.
That's true because like lifting, everybody wants to get in shape real quick. They get excited and they want the results, but results take time. And the same thing crosses over into guitar playing. As badly as I would love to get on a guitar and be able to play a song and just sound amazing, I know that if I don't practice, pay attention to technique and placement of my fingers and everything I'm doing, it's not going to work. I drum primarily, and it's the same concept. You're using 2 hands and 2 feet. And when you first get on there, you sound like a train wreck or a car accident happening over and over.
Yeah.
Until you can program muscle memory and train it in your mind. And that's when the flow comes. And so you can't ever, judge anybody by what they're doing because you don't know how they started. So the next question is, how do you balance your weird soundscapes with your meat and potatoes progressive riffs?
In the question lies the answer, I think. You just try to balance it. I think there's a concept of tension and release, which I think speaks to balance. You can have melodic parts that sound like uneasy, right? And they serve the resolution of the next part, right? So by utilizing tension, you can gratify the listener because you can like alleviate the tension, right? You can create rhythmic tension and release as well. Something can feel really urgent or anxious, and then you can create like rhythmic space, and so it feels like this sort of release. So it's all about balance. So the harmony that I like to use is like oftentimes pretty tense or pretty suspended or kind of just like out there, and then the riffs, everyone loves a good riff, right? So that's like home base, and that's like kind of foundational. And so the goal is to balance both of those elements so the full package feels like balanced and impactful.
That makes perfect sense. All right. So I know that we also kind of talked about this in the interview. So in case we didn't cover anything specific, one of our followers wanted to know, what's the one or few musical concepts that shaped your playing?
One or more musical concepts. There are some really basic foundational ones, like the distance between notes or intervals are literally how we create scales and how we subsequently create mood, right? So a half step interval versus a full step interval versus a minor third interval versus you know what I mean? These things are literally kind of the building blocks of harmony. And so getting into that consciously as opposed to just feeling around on the neck and being really aware of what, an augmented fifth interval sounds like or a diminished third, or these things gave me the tools to like consciously create colors and moods with harmony. But it's not like some crazy concept. It's literally like knowing the difference between a vowel and a consonant, and then you can create words. So, but music is so intuitive that a lot of people are self-taught and they just learn songs, but they're not getting forensic into why a dominant chord sounds really good right before a major seventh chord. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So like, there was a bit of that eventually I got into, and it helped me to understand kind of, I feel like an analogy of like a chef is useful. They know like, oh, I should put a little bit of like, smoked salt here, and this needs some citrus, and just those details can be the difference between something that blows you away versus something that just tastes pretty good,
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I think, a musical idea that is universally helpful. Yeah, and it's not genre specific, so yeah, that's probably the most important one.
So to kind of add on to that question, just something I was thinking of, I know when I wanted to first learn playing the drums, it started in like a junior high band. It was kind of cool, it was just 3 girls messing around. But when I wanted to take it more serious, and my parents couldn't afford drum lessons, we just didn't have that extra. For somebody that wants to self-teach themselves, yes, YouTube is great. You can learn so many things or find many tutorials. However, when you're trying to learn something technical like the guitar, you can find tons of videos that'll say beginner 101. Is there certain things that people should look for that's foundational that they should want to try to learn if they're going to search for something to self-teach themselves?
Yeah, I think the internet is an amazing tool of information, but it can overwhelm you too. Like, I've thought about this, and I feel fortunate that there wasn't Google and YouTube when I first started playing guitar. It's kind of good that I didn't know that Steve Vai existed when I first started playing, because I would have been like, oh, I can never play like that, so I might as well stop. And so I think for beginners, you're beginning a journey, and it can be overwhelming if you're aware of like the endless journey that's in front of you. And so I think the old school approach of getting a teacher is actually, if you can find a teacher who you feel like you can learn from, their teaching style makes sense to you, and I feel like that's the easiest way, because it's dynamic and interactive, and it's different than like getting some sort of chart online or even watching a video that you can't actually interact with. And then sometimes sitting in a room with a teacher and you're struggling with something, they can literally just be like, oh, you just need to put less pressure on the strings, or try this, And I think the learning curve of the guitar is substantial enough that you definitely benefit from someone like in the room with you, kind of helping you to get past the first few hurdles. And then I think you can get to a point where you can self-learn pretty easily. But I think a teacher is kind of still the most like effective way of like beginning the guitar. But everyone's different,
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I've heard you mention in a previous interview that music, specifically metal, is in essence a different kind of emotional release for you. And you felt that a lot of people neglect in music today, focusing on the negative side of emotions, which is something that is important to release. And if your music is an expression of you releasing negative emotions, I mean, you're releasing it in a beautiful way. What else could you say about that?
Yeah, I don't know if I would say like negative emotion per se, but like on the spectrum of emotion, there are things that are maybe in the realm of aggression or a bit darker. I mean, everyone loves a good dance song or a good love song, and I feel like these sentiments, they kind of dominate pop music. And so if you want more complexity out of your musical experience, like I feel like you have to turn away from pop music often. I mean, so metal to me has always been a really cool space that explored just different experiences that music could give you. And even, I mean, honestly, I felt bands like Nirvana and Soundgarden, and they were complex in what they were communicating. You know what I mean? It wasn't metal, but it definitely was evocative of a lot of complex emotions that weren't just love songs or party songs. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So metal is cool for that reason. I don't know if it's not necessarily negative. I think most metalheads are pretty happy people.
Oh, I definitely agree, and I guess negative isn't the proper word to use, and that's probably what a lot of people refer to, aggression or frustration or anger, because they'll say, oh, you're being so negative today. And for me personally, I'll drive up to a location where I'm meeting friends and they'll say, oh, you're listening to that devil music, or are you angry today? And I'm like, no, I'm in a great mood. They're actually singing about love right now. You know, just because they're screaming or you're hearing a very heavy riff doesn't mean that, you know, I want to drink blood and meet the devil.
Yeah. And I understand, like, to an outsider, metal seems like all that stuff, but it's kind of comical to. There are satanic bands, but I don't think that's like what's going on in metal for the most part.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not. So you are known, and everyone talks about this, for one of your honed skills of thumping. Can you tell me what inspired you to integrate this into your playing, and how do you do this amazing talent? I was kind of watching under your fingers, and you've got a lot of business going on down there.
Yeah, it's like a hidden technique. The thumping thing, I didn't originate the technique. It's, I think like the Wooten brothers are credited with kind of taking slap bass or guitar and just elevating it to this new level. So thumping, I think, usually is describing their approach to it. And it's really based off of, you know, getting a down and upstroke out of your thumb.
So you're actually hitting two different strings. You're hitting one string on the downstroke and you're striking another on the up?
No, I'm hitting the same string, but down and up. The same way you would alternate pick, you know, so like when you alternate pick, down and up, right? Well, that sort of thing, right? So it's cool because now you've opened up a lot of like really dense note groupings. But it gets interesting when you start adding other fingers. So like you could do groups of 3. So I'm going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, all on the same string.
Wow. From my angle, it's almost an optical illusion. It almost looks like you're hitting different strings, but I guess that's just part of the motion.
It's hard to see in general because it's so like, you know. And then you could do groups of 4 by going 1, 2, 3, 4. You know.
Wow.
Groups of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you play classical guitar, it's similar to like tremolo or something like that, where you're kind of doing, you know, 16th notes using all 4 fingers on the same string. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. That sort of thing.
It's incredible.
It's cool, and then you can start, I don't know, doing hammer-ons. You know, stuff like that, you know? It's fun. And there's more melodic examples using open strings. Like for instance, if I just did like a triad, I'm kind of plucking the open B string and then hammering on, you know, down this A minor triad and then thumping the last 2 notes, and you can get like stuff like that.
Incredible.
Yeah, so it's fun once you get the mechanics down because you can plug any harmony you want into it. But another reason I got into it was because of the 8-string having so much range, you know?
Yeah.
That sort of thing. So yeah, it's kind of like, I had a friend that I was in a band with, Evan Brewer, and he is like all over this stuff. And it was always like, yo, how do you do that?
That's the bassist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a bassist, but it's like the guy, he has a solo bass album where it's like he's playing, you know, touch style, like tapping, he's sweeping, economy picking, and he's also thumping. And he's kind of one of the first people I looked at and I was like, oh wait, it's a stringed instrument. Because he was cannibalizing so many guitar techniques, but he was also a bassist, and then he was also pushing all of it forward to it's probably the reason why playing 8 strings didn't feel strange. It was like, it's a stringed instrument. You can do what people do with stringed instruments on a stringed instrument, you know?
Yeah.
And so I felt comfortable going into more bass territory as well as doing all the shred stuff too. So.
That is phenomenal. You definitely have a very unique skill, and I think you pretty much showed us why you are considered one of the best 8-string guitarists.
You're the best.
Are you planning to make a reverb pedal to go along with the Pathos pedal?
Well, the idea behind Abbasi Concepts is that it will be a line of products, and I definitely want to make more pedals. So there will be things in the future, maybe reverb, but yeah, it's kind of, it's like a rabbit hole we're trying to go down, you know what I mean? So we'll see.
One step at a time,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Excellent. So to go along with your thumping, since you've already showed us how quick and amazing you can play, one of our followers wanted to know, what is the fastest BPM you can thump?
I have no idea.
You've never even tried to time yourself?
No.
I think we need to have a thumping challenge one of these days.
Oh God, it's not going to be that fast probably.
We'd probably be the fastest out of everyone.
It's probably pretty fast, but that's not a goal of mine. The speed is necessary for subdivision if you want to do like certain note groupings, so there is a benefit to having it, but I'm not just trying to like be like, how fast can I thump? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a t-shirt that says that.
How fast can I thump?
How fast
How
can I
fast
thump?
can Tosin thump?
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a perfect shirt. So, and then our last question is, do you have any plans to make your own masterclass DVD?
Funnily enough, the Thump DVD is actually a bit of a masterclass DVD. It's an instructional DVD that covers more than just the thump technique. But I called it Thump because so many people were kind of like, how do you do that technique? What's the deal? And so I felt like I needed to put something out that started from square one and like really built a foundational sort of like method to getting the technique down. But it isn't limited just to that technique. I cover harmony and like lead concepts and even like making like Axe Effects patches and stuff like that. So it's funny saying DVD now in 2018 because
Masterclass download?
yeah. But I think if anyone's looking to get a handle on my style, the Thump DVD is an excellent starting point. It's the most comprehensive instructional work I've put out so far. I might do more in the future, but that one is pretty thorough. So,
And where can people find this?
guitarmessenger.com. Yeah.
Fantastic. So, if this is your prototype, when are you actually looking to release your guitars?
We'll be at NAMM 2019.
All right, me too. I will
You gonna
definitely
be
stop
there?
by your booth.
Come through.
Absolutely.
I expect your thumping skills to be just dialed in.
All right, guys, we got to get practicing.
That's what's up.
I'm gonna have to go and get your DVD.
Yeah, we had switched manufacturers. So like I was at NAMM last year with the Abbasi guitars, and so the prototyping stage had been complete, but there were some things that occurred where I had to switch manufacturers. So we're now working with Grover Jackson, who started Jackson Guitars, Charvel Jackson, industry legend, and this is the first guitar that Grover's made, and so the new production line is in his shop, and so that's what I mean by prototype. But the brand, will be at NAMM, and people can have a chance to come and play the stuff in person, and we will be taking orders from then moving forward. So.
Oh, fantastic. And are these going to be American made then?
Yep, in Laguna Beach, California.
Oh, that sounds like a beautiful place for a beautiful guitar to be created.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just keep having all these questions popping up, but I did have somebody message me and ask me if you think that you will be creating a lower price, high quality Asian made guitar. And I'm thinking, why not let's just get it here in America, keep it in America, and will you have a lower priced beginner guitar made here in America?
We would love to provide these guitars at a price point that like makes it available to as many people as possible. Where you produce the instruments dictates how much you can sell them for. So the idea is to definitely have a product line that isn't just super expensive, the high-end stuff. It's great for people who want American-made custom shop stuff, but we definitely are like aware that we have tons of fans who like may not have the means, but we'd love to get them guitars. So yes, just sign up to our newsletter, and all that stuff will be like as it occurs. We will be letting people know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Tosin, thank you so much for sitting here with me and answering all of my questions. I absolutely love this guitar. I'm real excited for everyone to see it, coming out in 2019. You've been a pleasure to sit with. Good luck tonight playing, Generation X. And thank you guys all for tuning in here on Guitar World Magazine and AlyIsMagic.com. I'm Aly Veneno, and this is Tosin Abasi. Stay fresh.